Hello, everyone, and welcome to a wonderful, exciting another edition of Coffee and Conversations. I'm Leslie Appleton-Young. I'm a co-founder of the Woman Up program and also worked for the California Association for many years as their economist and then chief economist. And they just can't seem to get rid of me. So there's that. And today I have as my guest one of my favorite friends and people. And I'd like to introduce Jeanne Radsick. Hi, Jeanne.
Good morning. Thanks for having me on.
You're welcome. And I know you need no introduction. Jeanne was president of the California Association of Realtors in 2020. She has been in the real estate business for, I don't know, 38 years. You started in 1987. She's been a director of CAR since 1996. She is a working realtor, and I could go on, but you know, Jeanne, she's amazing. And thank you for all your volunteering. And I want to start with the fact that you are wearing a name tag. And this is a story that you told. I don't know if it was in strategic planning or in passing, but it's just a wonderful, it just tells you almost everything you need to know about Jeanne. So would you explain the name tag?
If you're going to be a working realtor, why would you be hidden? I mean, now I do take it off if I go into Nordstrom's, just got to tell you. But people will ask you, and particularly now, they'll ask you the most random real estate related questions. They'll stop. If you're in line in Costco and you've got a badge on, they'll say, "How's the market?" You know, and do I really sell them anything at that moment? Well, no, but it makes them or gives them confidence that they can ask you something. And I think
Right,
that's the best thing you can do. And I
right.
do wear it. Thank you, Leslie. I do wear it every day.
It's kind of like a presumptive hello to
Exactly.
someone, and it kind of says, I'm ready to talk. You know, you can approach me. And I've just always thought it was brilliant. You know, I've heard advice for being successful in real estate include answer the darn phone, you know, when people call. And this is another one that is just so basic. Tell people who you are. So,
I think one of the
anyway,
funniest things is that when you go up to a counter, like if you're going to pick up your dry cleaning or you're checking in for a doctor's appointment or something, they'll look at you. They've always got the badge on and they'll say, "And what is your name?" Now, see, that's coming from somebody that is not practiced at seeing the person in front of them.
right, right. Yeah,
Just kind of
seeing,
different.
listening, we all get into our, and it's just kind of a focal point, positive reminder like, here's a person, they have a name. Yeah. All right. Well, let's get started. You know, this is a session that is devoted to the kind of overarching topic of leading through crisis, and the fact that you were CAR's president in 2020, I think, qualifies you. You have street cred like no other. And so I'd like to start with just a kind of, where were you in 2019? You're president elect, you're getting ready for your year. And how did the first 2 months of 2020 go? And tell us a little bit about that. And I've been remiss. I want to welcome everyone that's joining us live. Thank you for being here. Please let us know you're here and where you're from in the chat. And for anyone listening to it on a recording, we're thrilled to have you here. So thank you. All right, Jeanne, let's talk about 2019 and early 2020.
Well, and I will tell you, in 2019, I mean, it was simply a busy year. I think I closed 35 transactions that year. In addition to, I drove all over the state because I did 16, I think. I didn't log it anywhere, but I remember counting 16 installations for incoming presidents and that kind of stuff.
Right,
And
right,
those were always fun. I mean, it just makes you smile thinking about it because everybody is A, in a good mood, and B, they're just excited to have you there.
right, right.
And there is no airline direct from Bakersfield to anywhere else in the state, so you just drive it. I mean, we do have flights like to San Francisco, but I would have to be at the airport by 4 AM to catch the flight to San Francisco. And why would you do that?
It's more
It's
trouble
it,
than it's worth.
yeah, it's a four-hour drive, so that was still a better deal for me.
Yeah, yeah. So you're going around, you're going to installations. What were some of the concerns that people, that our members had at that time?
Golly. I don't remember anything distinct. Maybe I've just blurred it in my head, but I don't remember anything distinctly as a challenge,
Yeah,
you know?
compared to recently. But I will say, I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
housing affordability was, front and center for many years. We haven't been um, lax in recognizing the challenge of affordable housing. So I think there was
Listen,
certainly a
since
focus there.
since I first started participating at CAR, I remember Joel Singer at one of the first times I ever heard him speak, talking about the lack of housing that we were building, that we were underbuilding by 200,000 plus homes a year. Now,
Right,
in my marketplace, we have always been building, always.
right, right.
And so that was mind blowing to me because I didn't personally see that.
Right, right. And I think that's one of the challenges of leadership is really letting people that aren't experiencing it personally understand the broader view. And I think you did that for CAR coming from I don't know if I want to call Bakersfield a more rural, but certainly in the Central Valley compared to LA or San Francisco. It's a different life.
Listen, my median sales price is at 395,000, not bajillion, but 395,000. And what's the state median? I don't even know because it's
It's
irrelevant
over
to me.
Isn't it over a million? I mean,
I
I
don't,
look at the numbers that Jordan is presenting, Jordan and Oscar, and I'm just like, oh my goodness, have I been gone that long? It's pretty incredible. Okay, so what about becoming president? You had an amazing installation yourself, which I'll never forget being asked to be on stage and toast you. That was a first. And what were those first 2 months, January and February, like?
well, my installation was actually, I think, February the 1st. So we had about 4 weeks before we started fussing with pandemic questions,
Right, right.
and if you want to know the truth, I don't even remember what my theme was supposed to be because it was so overwhelmingly done, at this point that it's like, it doesn't matter what that was, what was
No.
on the mental agenda. It was something about housing, which we always are. But um, when my memory of the very first board of directors meeting the morning after the installation. I don't know why, but I remember it very distinctly. Some poor gentleman, don't know who, and for any of you who have been to the board of directors, there's usually 4 microphones set up in the room, put your paddle up kind of deal. So this guy at microphone number 4, I recognized that microphone, and he used the word realtor. There was this buzz that went across the room going, kind of a deal. And so I looked at this guy. I said, don't worry, they'll always find something to be cranky about. And then told him to go on. Everybody laughed. And he went on with his question, but I guarantee he never said that word again.
Right.
The point being that I took the frustration out of it for everybody by making fun of it.
Right.
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 And I think that at some point epitomizes the way I dealt with a lot of the stuff when we were on these unbelievable Zooms. You got to have a little fun with it.
Okay, so you installation, first board of directors meeting, and then in a week or 2 or 3, you're off to DC, right? For the capital visits that we would do every year.
Yeah,
And what was that? Was
that
that your
was
first kind of inkling that something was up?
because when we got to DC, I mean, we had all these meetings set up and we went through the halls of Congress and there were little signs on some of the doors, which of course everybody ignored. And it said, please knock before you enter or whatever. So you would knock and then open the door, so there was an acknowledgement that something was happening, but nobody was really paying attention yet.
Yeah.
That was pretty interesting. And I think that was Sanjay's first meeting with us.
So how did things change as that week expired? Because I know that you said that by the time it was time to go, you were just happy to have a seat, getting out of there and getting back home. So what kind of transpired that week?
Well, except that the following week, my husband and I had reservations and we went to Hawaii because there was no such thought as a shutdown, really.
Right, right,
So we go to Hawaii for a week, period. And about 4 days in, now Hawaii had no issues yet. They didn't have known people with COVID.
right.
They were a little more isolated. But about Wednesday or Thursday, we wondered if we were going to be able to get back home. So that was very interesting. Obviously it worked out well, but it was just kind of interesting.
Yeah, yeah.
Because
your
how many
last
people took
pre
it seriously at that point?
Right. Well, when did, because I worked for Joel my whole career at CAR, when did you start getting the calls about we need to talk? We need
Yeah.
to figure out what's going on and what we need to be doing.
Joel was really good at reaching out. I never felt like it was my role to call and say, Joel, what are we doing about this? No, because by the time I came back, they were already going through the CAR headquarters and they had pulled all-nighters. He and several of the staff had been there all night to set up the Zooms, the working from home for the staff, the different things that we needed to do to stay alive in the business. And they were astonishingly well prepared. Yeah.
So by the time you got back from Hawaii, CAR staff was at home, and was the real
Just about,
estate shut down? Just
getting
nothing's
very
happening?
close to it. I think that
Yeah.
happened within a couple of days of that. Of course, I think that I won't quote, yes, I will. The one thing that I feel very proud about is that we kind of outflanked our governor in calling us not eligible to conduct business. And we found it in a different manner and
Yes.
kind of went around him and
Well,
got,
that was an early and probably the most important victory of
yeah,
that COVID experience, was
yeah,
saying, look, real estate is essential. And when you look at what happened to the market in, as it went on and into 2021 and 2022, it was like, oh my goodness.
yeah, yeah. But that was pretty interesting, that we were able to do that. And, then as we went through shutdown, and we couldn't do open houses and all the protocols that changed like every other day. And then we got the PEDS, and I think we had up to 20 versions of the
All right,
PEDS.
tell people what PED stands for, because I don't know if I remember.
I don't know that I
But
remember.
it was a form that people had to sign before they went into a house. Was that correct?
The other agent, the showing agent, had to send you a PED form confirming that they would abide by all the rules. You
Okay,
had to wear
right.
your masks, that you had to, I don't know what PED stands for. Man, I'll have to go back and see that.
I'm sorry, that was a trick question because
No,
I don't know the answer either,
no,
but I want to tell you, I knew it at the time.
exactly.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
I think we got up to version 20. that was available to us, and you had to present it to the listing agent. Well, then you'd get those agents that would call you and say, "Oh, I'll get you the PED." Uh-huh. I I am probably one of the few people that had an ongoing list. And so the next time they called, I'd say, "Oh no, I'm sorry, you won't be able to show my listing." "Why?" I said, "Because you never produced the PEDs that I asked for." Promise you, they produced them then.
Right. So what do you recall most vividly about that early part of the pandemic and real estate?
Um, eh, we escalated the amount of Zooms because we had just started using Zoom before we went into shutdown. Well, all of a sudden, I mean, that was a huge shift. And so we had weekly town halls that had begun by that time, which are ongoing today and extraordinarily valuable.
Is this with all the brokers?
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
But then
that was amazing,
but then
to
they had one for agents, you know,
wonderful. Yeah.
and it was absolutely fabulous, and then hundreds of people participated. Well, and as I said, I mean, one of the main questions was, when are we gonna be able to do open houses again? Now, I'm just telling you, I've never been hot and bothered about doing open houses, but there were agents, and I said, "Well, you all can't be trusted." Had like the air sucked out of the room. I said, "How many of you have seen signs about doing open houses?" I said, "The people all over Sacramento are doing open houses." Let's see, who lives there? Oh, the DRE folks. They see your signs. They know who you are. And if you can't be trusted to follow the rules and not have open houses, why would they rescind any other order? You've got to
Yeah.
prove that you're trustworthy about the process. And was it fun? No, but I got tired of hearing him whine about it. And it's, no, you guys are the ones that are setting the stage for this.
So talking about leadership, and I think that's a great leadership example where you just kind of tell people the truth, lay it out, call them out and say, not acceptable. Was that hard for you to do? Or was it just, being in the real estate business for so long and having 7 kids, like that was just like a no-brainer? Like just for you personally.
It it came to me naturally. I mean, I just got to
Yeah.
tell you,
Yeah. Yeah.
you have
Yeah.
a lot of kids, you've been this, done that within the world, even outside of real estate. You know, when you're coaching soccer and you marginally know a little bit more than the little 8-year-olds that you're coaching, you're still in charge. You're the mom, you know. And I did do it, hopefully, with as much grace as possible, but I also was not afraid of being a little snarky, like telling them, you're not trustworthy, or telling that poor guy that it's all right. You'll have to figure out how to pronounce realtor. I
Which is
mean, it just
probably the least of it at this point, right? Because we
yeah.
got to
But I
get
mean,
into pandemic.
if you can make people laugh or smile while
Yeah.
you're giving them the worst information possible, they're listening.
So, how did you get input when you couldn't see people face to face? So, I know we had these kind of official town hall organs and stuff like that, but my guess is knowing that realtors tend to have strongly held opinions and are not shy about expressing them. What was your phone experience like during this time? Give us a feel for that.
Um, Honestly, I didn't hear personally from a lot of people.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's like, I mean, one of my predecessors in the local association joked. She says, "No, no, I've got a bottle of scotch in my drawer," kind of a deal, and it was a joke. I never got those calls, and I don't know if it's because I'm so straightforward anyway, that they're being told what they should be told, and like it or lump
Yeah.
it, this is where we are.
Right. Right. But you knew people were upset, right? You knew
Sure.
that
Oh,
there
for
was a
sure.
lot of terminal. I guess what I'm trying to get at is what were the qualities that you kind of relied on to get through, which was just an extremely difficult and divisive and even more so today, but just that was really, brought all that to a head. Like what did you kind of dig out of the depths of your soul to be a leader? Because
You know,
you were the president.
well, but the reality is, and I still today have people say, Gina, I'm so sorry you had that year. And what I need everyone to understand is that I was lucky. I was extraordinarily lucky to be in that position at that time. It suited my personality. I
Right.
could I could bend, I could morph, I could snark, you know. But the reality is that when we started doing all these Zooms, um, the biggest thing it gave them, people needed to see, touch, and feel you. Well, okay, seeing you, I mean, when you get on a Zoom, okay, there's one person primarily that's at the head, and then you've got
Right.
pages of all the others, right?
Right.
If you're the focus that they're seeing you. And it still goes by today. I mean, people will say, oh, yeah, I remember you on Zoom. They need to feel that you're hearing them. They need to feel or sense that you're on their side. And I'll tell you, one of the things that I am frankly most proud of is that you'd be shocked at the numbers of emails I got, particularly after one of my president's columns in our magazine. I got hate mail. I got somebody that volunteered to come and shoot me. And that was after the George Floyd column that I did.
Ah.
And people that I thought I knew well were unbelievable. I answered every call, every email within hours, not if not minutes, because they needed to know you were participating. You weren't just telling them stuff, that you were there. And
That you were engaged in this conversation with them.
yeah,
Wow. Yeah.
and the best one, and I'll take a second to tell you, the absolute most memorable, and I have no idea who this person is, so it's not like I'm pinning on somebody, but I got it must have been an email first from someone. Then the guy called me and he was all but crying. He said he didn't know how he was going to feed his family next week if he couldn't sell real estate. He was distraught. It was a Friday night. I got his number, I got his information. I called Mark Farfel and I asked him if he would call this guy. This guy got a call from Mark that night telling him how to apply for the PPUA or whatever those acronyms all were.
Right. Right.
This guy was seen and heard and dealt with in a manner that he needed. And it was 8:30 on a Friday night. I thought that was extraordinary.
Extraordinary.
You know, Mark remains one of my favorite guys because he is so involved in that and he's so good at it.
And he's so responsive. He's always just right there.
Yeah.
You know, yeah.
Anyway,
Speed of response is something that people
people
appreciate.
feel. And on that particular column, I mean, I got somebody that I thought I knew well that chose to tell me that I was wrong. And as I finally responded to them, I said, I said, I know you have grandchildren. And I said, I don't want my grandchildren to ask me. The last Sambo's restaurant was in the Santa Barbara area, and
Right.
it was closed for renovation. And I said, I don't want to have to explain to my grandchildren why this little boy is being chased around the trees. There has to be a different symbol. There has to be a different approach to how we want to convey things to our grandchildren. And I knew this person had multiple grandchildren that they talked about often on Facebook. And I said, I refuse to acknowledge that that is something we should condone. And they at least
Wow.
thanked me for a response. But
Yeah. Yeah. Wow.
you know. Anyway, sorry.
Okay, just a few more things on the pandemic and then we'll move on. But is there anything that you would have personally or as an organization you think we should have done differently, looking back at how we approached, communicated, handled the whole experience of the COVID pandemic?
Frankly, no. I think that the CAR was extraordinary, and they were immediately the model for all the other associations in the state. They didn't,
Yeah,
they didn't say, this is what you have to do, this is how you have to do it. But here's a Zoom contract that you can use to have all your meetings. And you can do this and this. In other words, they modeled. Now, for my own local association, which is Bakersfield, my brand new CEO was a dear friend of mine. And she was, as soon as I heard something, assuming it wasn't a top secret, I mean, I shared it with her. It was out on our local wires at the same time CAR put it out. But
wow.
CAR was so responsive, it's like I couldn't beat them to it, you know?
Yeah.
And it was fabulous.
Yeah, I mean, it really brought out kind of, I guess you could say the best and the worst, but I'd like to focus on the best and how we navigated it. And again, as I alluded to, people's demand for different types of real estate and different types of places just exploded. And certainly looking back at that period compared to kind of the malaise we've had for the past couple of years as rates have been high and just affordability has kind of kept so many first-time buyers on the sidelines. It really was a incredible opportunity to get into housing at that time.
Absolutely. It
No.
was amazing. Once we were able to, whether it was tedious or not, is kind of beside the point, the wiping the doorknobs and all that kind of stuff. I mean, yeah, I don't want to know how many people had to replace doorknobs for their clients because it tarnished them. You know,
Okay, well, I'd like to kind of move on from that and talk about the lawsuit and the more recent changes and how business is done, or changes that aren't, certainly hearing that there's a few changes around the edges, but kind of the change they really wanted to see is not, or at least the protagonists here haven't really happened. But I just, from your perspective, in this watershed moment, how has your practice of real estate um, changed, and has it changed how you see, how your role in the business?
I mean, I was anxious just like everybody else. I attended every Zoom, every legislative update, every form update known to man before August hit that we were supposed to make these changes to our contracts. And it was good to be informed and know what was happening, but it was a whole lot of stuff about how we still do business, meaning has it changed the way we do business? It changes how I verbalize to my clients. Before, you would go through the contract and you'd say, okay, this is the listing agreement and I've put X amount down for, and you understand down here's where I'm sharing that with the other agent. And then you just kept moving on. Well, now I am much better at saying, this is just the commission you will be paying me. Now, in reality, when you get, so you articulate better for the consumer how that's going to impact them. And has it changed much?
Do they ask more questions? Are they aware that there's been a change?
They are aware that there's been some upheaval, but they really don't know what that means.
Yeah. Okay.
And so they do ask questions, but it's surface questions. You know, it's
Yeah.
not it's not something that's going to change them.
Yeah. Well, looking at all the discussions on clear cooperation and
Uh,
possible mergers or not. It seems that we are in for maybe a little bit of a bumpy ride going forward in terms of the industry. But certainly one thing we know is it's not the first time, it won't be the last time, and staying focused on home ownership and the needs of the consumer is what it's about.
You work with your clients, and that's however they need your services, they need your expertise and they need your confidence. I mean,
Yeah.
I've just closed two where I was the backbone because it was a trust sale. The guy actually put my name in his will that I was to be the agent. I've never seen that before. It was really kind of affirming that he liked how I did business. And then there were family fights going on. Her family, his family,
Always. Yeah.
always. And the one that was doing the trust estate as the executor was getting nothing out of it. So she just got all the poo-poo from the relatives. And I said, no, you just tell them this. I just talked to my realtor and the answer is this. And it gave her the backbone she needed to get through. And that is what we do. That is our biggest advantage to people, is telling them the reality so they can say, oh yeah, my realtor says no.
Right. And that's where experience comes in, right? I've done this before. So I didn't give you this question, but I do want to, I think you won't have a problem with it. I want to know, what do you consider to be the most challenging part of your job, of your business? And has that changed over time?
Um, eh, the most, I don't know what the most challenging part is, other than there is um, like 500 times more paperwork than when we started.
Yeah.
And I, I am, I have difficulty with some of the teams. I mean, I got this long list of questions that somebody on this team of 8 people sent me. And I said to the agent, I said, this is offensive. All they have to do is look at the MLS and they'll get half of the answers. And then maybe they could ask the selling agent some of these questions instead of having me do their work for them. That just annoys me. That
Yeah.
just annoys me. They're just checking. No, you have to know something. But when you hire a team, I don't know if these people are licensed or not. It's kind of immaterial, but they're just checkbox people,
Yeah.
you know? And so I think that where I have gotten to is that I have comfort in what I bring to the table. And I think that comes across when I talk to my clients, you know?
Yeah. Well, and you have the CV to back it up with
But I also
all that
read.
you've done.
I
Yeah.
read every day. I read tons of stuff. And that doesn't mean I agree with it all, but when I read about, you know, I don't read Inman, sorry. Joe Ventrone has all these things that he reprints every day, courtesy of NAR, and he's got 6 or 8 articles. And you read about what real estate agents are doing and how they're not performing. It saddens me that they'd
Yeah.
rather fight the system than do the job.
Right. Right. All right. Well, in the context of Women Up, I just want to kind of hear how you feel about, like, gender as the experience of the pandemic kind of went through, and I'm sure molded you in new ways. I mean, obviously it's like you said, like everything was off the table. And just really talk a little bit about how that impacted how you chose to lead during that time, and as you look back, Do you feel like you're a different woman, if you
Yeah,
will?
at some level, for sure.
Yeah,
Um, because I have more confidence.
yeah.
It was a confidence builder because you simply had to put one foot in front of the other and get there. I am more empowered, but I also see that I am, as a female, I am still often overlooked. And when we go to,
By whom?
well, and I will be specific enough, it'll probably tick some people off, but
Yeah.
when we go out of area meetings, every gentleman there that's a past president will get invited to something. Oh, we forgot to ask Jeannie.
Oh,
Do you think any of them would be forgotten?
no.
Do you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
is it their individual problem? No, but it's a collective. And I know I'm probably part of the problem because I'm not aggressive about it. I'm not aggressive to say, wait, you mean you guys all went to dinner and you didn't invite me? You know, that just feels too rude,
Yeah.
you know. But I do get left out of that kind of stuff still today. And I find that kind of stunning. And not because I feel a personal, oh my God, let's not ask her. I don't believe that to be the case.
No, it's almost like being invisible, though.
Exactly. And I really believe that that's still part of it. Yeah.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up because I think that there's, sometimes a tendency to look at how far we've come, what role would women up and all the other women ups that have grown up
Right.
over the last few years, which are just, warms my heart. But this feeling like, well, what are you guys still upset about? And yet the aggressions, I guess they call it microaggressions that you experience as a female, um, not to mention if you're a female, a person of color, not plain vanilla, like, if you're
Yeah.
different, that you experience every day. And I certainly have felt it on panels, where I'm not called on or I'm not recognized, or
Because
I
the
have
other
a thought that
panelists are
someone,
all men. Yeah.
yeah, and or I have a thought that someone else steals and kind of is like, oh my God, I had this great thought, and it still happens all the time. So I think
Right.
it's important. I think awareness is the first thing, but secondly, to really recognize that there's power through sharing these stories and realizing that we've really got to keep modeling for the next generation, not just of women, but of men.
Well, and I will tell you something that happened recently that really kind of tightened my jaws, and it was not purposeful. So I need you to know
Yeah.
that. But I
Yeah.
went to the President's Circle in Orlando. It was excellent, nicely done. And they had these speakers. Well, one of them was my former congressman, who is a well-recognized name, Kevin McCarthy. And so he was one of the speakers. And by the way, he and Rahm Emanuel were on the stage together. Not realizing these guys were good friends, Shannon McGann was trying to get him there on Tuesday. He said, I can't come, put me on Monday. And she said, well, I had to put you behind Rahm. He says, put us on together. We're good friends. So it was without question the best panel I have ever
Oh, it
seen,
must have been. Oh my goodness.
because poor Kevin Sears had his little cards that he was supposed to be asking his questions off of. Well, he got one question out, and then the two of them went
Just off and running, right?
off and running. And finally, Ron Emanuel says, do you have any questions that fit our answers? It was hysterical. But Kevin McCarthy gave me a shout out from the stage. And a friend who used to sell real estate in Bakersfield, who's now in a different state on the East Coast, she was sitting next to me. Well, she managed to understand that there was a line to go back and get a photo back there. It was never suggested to me that it would be available, that I could go have a photo taken with them. And it pissed me off. You know,
Yeah.
Was it intentional? No, I don't think so. But it should have been intentional to let me know.
Yes.
It should have been
Absolutely.
intentional.
Absolutely.
And that annoyed me. I'm sorry I used that other word, but it really annoyed me because it's like he was my congressman. You know, how many people do you think are getting a shout out from the stage saying, yeah, my person is Jeanne Radsick. I think she's here, you know?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I felt again left out. Part of it may be my fault, but it just until somebody says this is an opportunity for you, you don't just go, well, do I have this option? You know, anyway, so
No,
that
it's,
was
I don't think it's, I really kind of agree. I don't think it's personal. I think this is structural, and it's been this way for so long that people don't even recognize, when they're interrupting. I mean, I have this joke with John, and I will say, and this is a quote from a movie where Clooney and Julia Roberts, George Clooney and Julia Roberts, and he interrupts her, and she goes, "I'm sorry, did the middle of my sentence interrupt the beginning of yours?" And I say that all the time because if you're interrupting me, it means you're not listening to me. And just even at that basic level. So, the most exciting thing that has happened in our family in the last few months is that my younger daughter, Kelly, had a baby in December, and his name is George, after my dad. And it's the first boy in that generation. All the cousins had girls. And so we're kind of like at this moment, like, oh my God, what do we do? And this poor kid is going to be so aware of all the gender. We want him to be one of the good ones,
fun is
and
that.
yeah, it's really something. Um so I also want to just, again, it's women up, and just in terms of your personal life, you have your wonderful husband, Michael, and you guys have been married, what, 48
Um,
years?
we celebrated our
50,
50th last
50th,
August. Yeah.
50th, 50 years, seven beautiful children, all launched into wonderful careers. Can I just ask you, because I always hated how when people ask me this, but I'm going to ask you it because I'm curious, like, how'd you do it? how did you, how did you and Michael work that with careers and kids and all of that?
I, I don't know. It was such a part of my husband worked out of town. So he would leave the house at a little after 7 and he would get home after 5. So shuffling the kids around to different, you know, practices or whatever was my job. And I will tell you, I was such a nice wife that when I said, okay, I'm going to be showing houses. So you need to pick up this one, this one, this. And he stopped and he says, that won't work. I said, oh, that's right. Of course it won't work. Move your ass faster and it will work. You know, he never forgot that, and he never made that kind of comment again.
Right,
But the
right. Oh my
reality
God.
is, women are geared differently. I mean, we just are to be that huzzy person. And we were just not too long ago looking at old family films. You know, when they came out and you had that big black thing on your shoulder, and now we've all got it in our purses. Anyway, it's like
Right.
watching me as we're camping, watching me say, I've got one on my hip who's not walking yet. I've got another one that's a 2-year-old, and then all the others in between. And I'm saying to the oldest one, who is probably 12 at that point, okay, Carolyn, can you go do this and this and this? Watch somebody, walk them to the bathroom. Okay. Because that was just a part of what they did. They knew
Right.
that was part of the job.
Right.
Right. So did I do it by myself? No, I
No.
truly didn't. But you had to always be cognizant of what was happening around you. And a lot of these folks have always heard me. My worst year was when I had 7 kids at 6 different school sites on 6 different soccer teams, and CCD over here, and confirmation over here, and oh yeah,
Yeah.
that was where it blurted out of me. Yeah, you just have to move faster.
Right. Right. And that's
And
how you create a life, right?
that's it.
And what does it feel like now looking at them as adults?
You know, I have to tell you, and I will focus on just the one, but I have a picture on my phone. My daughter, who is the assessor for our county, went to the inaugural. Well, then they got there. She went with a lady friend, and when they got there, of course, life changed because they moved it inside, and they together determined they were not going to stand for 12 hours out in 11-degree weather to get the inside track. So they ended up going to wherever they were having all these balls, you know,
Mhm.
and she was standing there with her friend, and this lady says to them, I need 2 volunteers to work this table. If you'll volunteer for an hour, then you get to stay. Well, it was the California ball. Now, did they
Oh,
intentionally know it? No. So they ran to Macy's, got these fabulous looking dresses, went back to the hotel, got fluffed, puffed, and taken care of. We're back within 4 hours, manned the table. Then she heard this gentleman introduce himself. He says, oh, I'm with the California Association of Realtors. And she turned around, waited till he finished speaking. And she said, did I hear you say? And he said, well, yes. She goes, my mother is Jeanne Radsick. Well, it was Otto Katrina. And it's the best photo because they both have these big grins,
oh,
you know.
right. Like coming home.
Yeah. But she knew that was more important to him than saying, my name is Laura Avila. And, so she just blurted
No.
out, yeah, my mom is Jeanne Radsick.
Oh, that's all. That's all she needed to say.
Yeah.
That's a
Yeah.
beautiful story.
Isn't that
It's
fun?
amazing. So good. So good. Um, okay, well, let me ask you my last kind of serious question, and that is advice. What advice do you have for all of us when we're facing an unexpected, unwelcome
Issue.
crisis, situation, environment, whatever? What advice would you, because you've been through a few of them.
I, I guess I would say it's your demeanor that changes how everyone else responds. So keep calm. I mean, it doesn't mean you can't go, oh my God, but keep calm and don't show the stress because the stress is what you internalize.
Ah, good
And
point.
i- as I've already shared with you, I'm unafraid of calling things out or calling people out if needed. I try not to be a smarty pants about it so much as
Right,
a snarky pants about it. Because again, it goes back to once they laugh, now you have their attention.
right.
You can go further into the conversation. I think that it's about your self-perception and how you present it because that changes everyone around you.
Yeah. You know, that attitude and a name tag, and I think you're good to go, right? All
I
right, I have
love
a
that you
couple.
like my name tag. I
I
think
love
that's
it
great.
so much. Obviously, I haven't forgotten it after all these years. So I want to just end with the fun kind of rapid fire questions that are James Lipton used on the Actor Studio,
I
which I was
remember
just
those.
addicted to.
Yeah,
I love those interviews.
yeah.
And I'll start with what is your favorite word?
I gave that a fair amount of thought, and I think it's joy
Oh,
because joy is a distillation of all the happiness that you can acquire.
least favorite word.
That won't work.
I
Of
make an
course it will. Of
exception for that.
course it will. Move your ass faster.
Oh my God. What turns you on?
People with energy. I like being around people that have energy because, again, that imbues everybody around
What turns you off?
them. Self-aggrandizement.
Mm,
People who think they are the crown wearers, even if nobody else agrees.
yeah. What profession other than your own would you like to attempt?
You know, when I was in the 5th grade, I wrote a paper, How to Be a Teacher. Swear to God, that was the title. 2 years later, I was going to be an interpreter for the UN
Ah,
because I was taking Latin, had French on my radar, took Spanish, you know, so I was going to be an interpreter for the UN. And
lovely.
I still think that's something that I would like to do.
You never know.
You
You
never
never
know.
know. What is one memory that stands out for you from the pandemic years?
I think the grace that was afforded to me to be myself. I
Mm,
didn't have to prove myself to anybody or emulate someone else. None of my predecessors have been through it. So I could do it in my own fashion, and that was wonderful.
well,
And
one of
and Joel allowed me that. He
yes,
never knew what was coming out of my mouth next. But that was also part of the fun. I
you
mean,
were a loose cannon in a really good way.
I think I was, and he would look at me, give me this look like, "Oh my God, did she just say that?"
Well, I think the other thing in addition to the name tag that I've remembered from talking to you is I've heard you say on many occasions, I loved my year. I was lucky where everyone else is saying, gee, you didn't get to travel, you didn't get to this and that. And you're like, oh my gosh, it was amazing. And I love that about you. Okay, if you could go back and give yourself one piece of advice before starting your career, right? You're
Yeah,
back before 1987, what would it be?
don't be afraid. You know, find your voice, your own voice. And I think what was people always saw in me things that I didn't yet see for myself. And when I look backwards, I think that was a special thing.
Yeah. Biggest regret?
Um, Taking 20 years to be that brave person.
Oh, isn't it terrible that it took us so
Yeah.
long to get to this point where it's like, wow, I'm me, and then it's like your body starts going.
Oh, don't go there.
I'm sorry I said that. I'm sorry I said that. Okay, I have a few more because I'm always interested in people's morning routine. Like, how do they set up for their day in the morning? So, what does yours look like?
I actually read the local paper, stem to stern. I am more selective at reading some of the articles now than I used to be because it's online and
Right.
you can get moved by it. 3 cups of coffee, a mound of grapes, and I I read a lot, a lot. And I've gotten addicted to reading SF Gate, which is put out for the San Francisco area. You'd be shocked at how much of the rest of the state they cover. And they're not, I mean, I love reading that. I read a part that comes from the New York Times. It's just a synopsis. And, Joe Ventrone, I may not get to his till about 3 in the afternoon because it takes real concentration to get through some of that stuff.
Right.
But I read a bunch.
And you subscribe to Joe's through NAR or just through
Uh-huh.
him personal? Through NAR. That's awesome.
Yeah,
That's
it
great.
is. Um, I'll have to see
I
if
have
I
to find out. I was going to talk to him directly, but as with my new position with FMLS, I am an affiliate member of NAR and the Atlanta Association of Realtors and the Georgia Association of Realtors. So I just want you to know dreams do come true.
well, I'll tell you, his response is a little different than it used to be. It used to be Joe Ventrone at NAR.com. Well, he's officially been retired for about 3 or 4 years, but it's now Ventrone at noteworthyclips.ccsend.com.
Okay.
And so, yeah, I mean, when I had a new GAD show up, I text him, I said, can you add her to the constant contact? He says, of course. I just think that's invaluable stuff. I really
Yeah.
do.
what a gift.
Yeah.
What a giving back is that's incredible. Um, Tell us about one person who's had a meaningful impact on you.
Back before life started, I worked for a medical laboratory that was about a mile from Loma Linda. And the doctor who owned the lab um, was extraordinarily intelligent. He was noteworthy. He had done, a lot of notable autopsies. And I know that's not a high topic, but he would walk in the back door every morning at 7:20 and almost always was singing an aria.
Oh,
And then he'd come around the corner and he would say, "Good morning, girl." I'd say, "Good morning, sir." And we would do our deal. Now, I was only hired as the receptionist. I became general manager within 4 years and actually became his executor of his estate when he passed away.
oh my goodness.
And, you know, fighting family included. Well, I wasn't family, so I didn't care. I shouldn't say I
Yeah.
didn't care, but it was like I was removed from that
You
world.
weren't invested in it. Yeah.
But he was
Oh,
brilliant. But he
I
also
love that.
loved that I had started having kids when I worked there. And so by the time my oldest was about 3 or 4, if I came in with her, he'd be at his microscope and he would sit there and he'd be looking down like this into the lenses. And of course, she's 3 and she says, "What are you doing?" And he says, "I'm just looking at funny pictures." And it would go on. I mean, he would play with it at a level that she understood, but that was very special. That was very
Very
special.
love that. What would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
At last, you have done
Oh,
well.
oh. Anything else that you would like to share with us in terms of podcasts, books, anything that kind of would be of interest to the Women Up community?
I've got podcasts on my list, but I never get there because I'm reading a book by my bedside table. I've got one on a little, whatever you call it, that I carry with me on airplanes. So it may be, a while in between. And I listen to random books in my car. So
On Audible, yeah.
the one that I just finished was a memoir by Tom Selleck. And that was very interesting because he wrote it in 2024. So it's not old news, it's not stagnant. But
Right.
I found it very interesting.
What a career he's had.
Oh my gosh. That was fascinating. But some of the ones, like the little book reader that I use on the plane, one of the last ones I read was about the life of Kit Carson, but it was written by somebody that had known him. So the grammar structure was very old school, kind of a deal. And it talked about what they did and how he influenced the Indians. And the other one that I read that I would never have picked up, my husband has a list on here. So I simply read what he's selected, and most of them are historical. Just tell
Yeah. Yeah.
But it was about slavery, and not slavery as you and I have grown up thinking about it, but the slavery that the Indians created between their various tribes.
Mm-hmm.
That the Arapahoes did this to these guys and these guys. I'm not going to say any other names because I can't remember who intersected with whom, and how then the Indians from the Caribbean were the lowlifes, and they treated them as such. It was fascinating because we think of slavery as the slavery we grew up with, the plantation system and that kind of stuff. This was very interesting. Gives you fresh perspectives.
Well, I think it does, and I've been doing a lot of history and, looking back at Greece and Rome, and, slaves were a part of all of that,
Everything.
right? I mean,
Right.
it just is something that needs to be understood and eradicated.
We keep taking
One
little steps forward, but it's not there yet.
Well, I will take this opportunity. There's one podcast that I'm just enjoying so much, and it's called "And the Rest is History," and it's by two British history professors that are very learned, have written a lot of books, and they're so darn funny. But there must be, I don't know if it's 300 or 600 episodes about all different points in history. One morning I was hearing all about the library in Alexandria, and then there's 4 episodes just on the French Revolution. I mean, all the holes in your education, and we all have them, and it can be fun, but it also just makes you realize that where we are today is part and parcel of where we've been. And I think having that perspective is really important.
Without question.
So, Jeannie, this has just been wonderful. I was looking forward to it so much, and it's so good to see you for a whole hour. But to
Leslie,
also
it's been
just
such a
hear,
pleasure.
you know, just to kind of hear what it was like from your experience, your perspective. And I just want to thank Women Up for the opportunity. I want to thank everybody that is listening in one way or another. And Jeannie, I just wish you all the best, and I look forward to seeing you in June
Oh, yay.
at Women Up, because I will be there. I actually get to interview a famous NAR female economist. So
Great.
I'm probably not supposed to say her name, but you probably know her. But anyway, I'm very much looking forward
If
to
it's
seeing you
JL, I
there.
think we're going to be good.
Yeah, I think
Okay.
I'm going to be good. All right. Well, we're going to sign off now. Jeannie, thanks again.
Thanks for having me.
You
Bye,
bet.
everybody.
Take care, everybody.